Hey guys, today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books of 2024. So that's pretty self-explanatory. These are going to be all of my favorite books that I read in 2024. So let's get going. In total, I have 15 books. And as always, when I do these videos, I like to divide it up into two separate categories just to kind of make it a little more smooth and easy on myself and how I kind of view these books in particular, I guess. So the very first category of my favorite books are books that are brand new to me, books that were published pre 2024. So yeah, like I said, totally brand new to me. And then the second category of books, that is going to be books that I read downright in the year of 2024. So up first is going to be my 5 favorite books that I read in 2024 but were published before 2024. At number 5, The King's Curse by Philippa Gregory. I am just super behind on Philippa Gregory, or I was anyway, so I made it my mission in 2024 to not only reread all of my Philippa Gregory books that I've loved and enjoyed in the past, but also fill in the gaps of some of her books that I have thus far neglected, that for whatever reason I just have not gotten around to. So yeah, The King's Curse was one of those books that I finally got around to for the first time this year. And this book follows Margaret Pole, who was the cousin to King Henry VIII. And what Margaret Pole is very notoriously known for is the fact that, when Henry VIII was just really going absolutely nutty and kind of just executing people left and right, just you're a traitor, you're a traitor, you're a traitor, kind of, he was like Oprah, but, instead of giving away free cars, he was executing people. So Henry VIII, he executed Margaret Pole. And the thing is, Margaret Pole was like a very elderly woman, and it was kind of scandalous at the time that he did such a thing on a woman like that, a woman who was part of the nobility, a woman who was part of the last of the Plantagenets, but that was just it. Henry VIII felt threatened by the last of the Plantagenets because the Tudors came in directly after the Plantagenets and usurped the throne, essentially. So Henry VIII was very, very threatened and just saw treason and betrayal everywhere. So yeah, Margaret Pole, unfortunately, was executed. So yeah, this book is told entirely in the point of view of Margaret Pole. From the time she's like a married woman and then into her widowhood, and yet going into her elderly years, and her relationship with all of her children, her relationship with not only her cousin Henry VIII, but her relationship with like someone like Catherine of Aragon, and some of Henry's other queens. I thoroughly really enjoyed this book. It's like I kind of know about Margaret Pole on a very surface level, so it was nice to kind of get some other further additional details. And yeah, again, this is historical fiction, so it was fun to kind of go back and see what is historically accurate and what's kind of, what are some liberties taken within this book. But I really love this. I love the voice of Margaret Pole and her journey, her story, the tragedy. Oh my God. At number 4 is The Taming of the Queen, also by Philippa Gregory. Very much like The King's Curse, this was one of those Philippa Gregory books that I finally got around to in the year of 2024. And what this book is focusing on, it is focusing on the 6th and final wife of Henry VIII, Catherine Parr. And what an incredible woman Catherine Parr was. A lot of times, because she is the last wife of Henry VIII, a lot of times people kind of tend to forget her, and they forget what an incredible woman she was. She was a very intelligent, outspoken woman in her own way during this time period. She published her own books, you guys, which was unheard of for a woman to do during this time period. And yes, she was a very devout Protestant, very much for the Reformation and whatnot. This book is just so harrowing because Catherine Parr knows that Henry VIII has been married 5 times previously. Here she is, the 6th wife, and kind of this paranoia, like, could he get rid of me two. He divorced his first wife. He beheaded his second. His third died in childbirth. He then divorced the fourth one. He beheaded the fifth one, and now here she is, kind of worried, will he do the same to me? Will I either be divorced or beheaded? So that very much lingers in Catherine Parr's head through the entirety of this book, which really creates some truly dramatic situations. And the thing with Catherine Parr, I think, compared to a lot of his other wives, other than Catherine of Aragon, I feel like Catherine Parr, it's like she kind of knows at this point, this late in the game, it's like she knows how to play the Game of Thrones, if you will. She knows exactly how to manipulate and control Henry VIII and what he wants to hear and what he doesn't want to hear. So it makes her a really intriguing character and just like a very pivotal woman during this time period. At number 3, Royal Blood by Amy Carter. I tell you what, guys, I can't believe this book made it into my favorite books of the year, because I read this book fairly early in 2024, thinking it was just going to be kind of your typical standard young adult fiction, and I would read it and not think much of it after the fact. But I freaking loved this book. I was so pleasantly surprised with this book and the direction it took. It follows a young woman who, she's American, but she's the illegitimate daughter of the King of England. So this is like an alternate universe of the British monarchy, if you will, where we don't have the Windsors as they are now. It's a whole kind of different branch of the British monarchy. So as I said, she's American. She's the illegitimate daughter of the King of England, and through some circumstances that she kind of gets in trouble, she winds up back in England under the care and protection of her father, the King of England. And boy, oh boy, does the media just get wind of all this, and they ill-treat her and ill-abuse her, and they say terrible things about her. And not only does she have to deal with the media, which over in the UK, the media is a brutal thing, apparently. And she has to deal with the media. She has to deal with her extended family, in a sense, most of whom don't even know she exists. So they do find out she exists now. And the people who do know she exists, they just don't like her. So the majority of the family just do not like her. They do not trust her. They see her as kind of someone coming in who is set to destroy the monarchy and their way of life. And yeah, this book, very early on, there is kind of this whole murder mystery aspect that does happen fairly early on in this book, because the main girl, she does get wrapped up into this big scandal with a dead body, and a lot of people think she had something to do with it, and her father, the King of England, is just trying to cover it up and protect her. And yeah, there's like a whole other side. They're trying to use her as like a scapegoat for this murder and whatnot. So yeah, this whole book is her trying to clear her good name in the media, like, hey, I didn't murder anybody. If anything, I'm also a victim here in this whole tragedy that has happened. So yeah, I just thoroughly was impressed with this book, you guys. And yeah, just it's wild that this ended up in my favorite books of the year. At number 2, They Went Left by Monica Hess. Woo! You guys, this book is an emotional roller coaster of a book. This book follows a young woman post World War II. This young woman is Jewish, and she was at one of the concentration camps, and she managed to survive the concentration camp. And this is her journey in her life post World War II, post being in a concentration camp, and yeah, trying to reconnect with her family. She knows for a fact that her mother and father are dead, that they died in the camps, but she's really unsure about the state of her little brother. She's not sure if he's alive or dead. So she spends this entire book trying to search for her brother, reunite with her brother, and it's kind of this whole thing of how do you find and reconnect with somebody in war-torn Europe? War-torn Europe at this time is a desolate, bleak landscape, and you have so many displaced peoples. And yeah, this is a time when you don't have, you don't have text messages, you don't have phones like they are nowadays, you don't have emails, you don't have the internet, you don't have these advanced ways to try and find people. So it's quite an ordeal for her to even try to figure out where her brother is and where he could have possibly gone, what are the steps he could have taken, I just freaking loved this book, you guys. Like I said, it was an emotional roller coaster. The main girl in this is just such a relatable, raw character, and you really feel for her. And yes, she does. She obviously has a severe amount of PTSD, coming out of a concentration camp and whatnot. This is a work of young adult fiction. But don't let that deter you from reading this book, because I know a lot of people, they hear the word young adult and they're like, this is one of those young adult books that I think anybody could read this and just love it and enjoy it and appreciate it for what it is. Seriously, this is the type of book I feel like people should like read in school. This is one of those types of books that you can sit and read in like a school setting and talk about and analyze. It's that good in my opinion. And my number one favorite book that was published pre-2024 is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, I think is how his name is pronounced. Wow. You guys, this friggin' book. How to even describe this book? I'm not even sure how to describe this book, because it's one of those books, the less you know, the better. So I'm going to do my best to get through some sort of vague synopsis here. What you need to know about this book. It follows a man named Aidan Bishop. The thing is, Aidan Bishop has 8 days and 8 host bodies to try and figure out the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle. So that is definitely not a spoiler, that this character, Evelyn Hardcastle, she is going to die. It is a known fact that she is going to die. So the big thing with this book, it's part period drama, parts a bit of science fiction to some degree, which I'm not going to get into why it's science fiction. And yeah, it's part murder mystery. There's definitely this element of like Downton Abbey meets Agatha Christie meets, if anyone has seen the German TV series Dark, because that's a show that deals a lot with like time travel and things like that, science fiction elements. That German TV series Dark, I definitely was kind of getting slight little vibes of that while I was reading it. So again, Downton Abbey, Agatha Christie, Dark. It's insane, you guys. And yeah, the main character of Aidan Bishop, like I said, he has 8 days to try and figure out the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle. But the thing is, he's in a continuous loop. Every 24 hours, the loop repeats for 8 days. And each time he goes into a different host body, because there's like this party being held for Evelyn Hardcastle. It's like some sort of homecoming event for her, and a lot of people have been invited to this party. So he's inhabiting the body of 8 different people over the course of this book, trying to get different points of view and perspective. If anybody knows anything about who is going to target and kill Evelyn Hardcastle. Does all that make sense? I feel like it's just so vague and doesn't really make much sense. It makes sense in my head, like talking it out. But yeah, this is a wild book. Yeah, guys, you're either going to love it or hate it. It kind of just depends on what you're looking for. A big thing with this book, this is a type of book that you're not really going to get all the answers that you want. This book definitely ends in a rather kind of vague place, and you definitely end with a hell of a lot of questions. But Stuart Turton, he's not here to hold your hand or coddle you while you read this book. This is definitely a very thought-provoking book. You are forced to think, and think a lot. You are thinking every step of the way and trying to figure out what exactly is going on and how little pieces connect. Again, Stuart Turton is not here to hold your hand and explain things. You're either paying attention or you're not. And I love that about this book, how mature it was. And yeah, I didn't feel like I was being coddled too while I was reading it. So again, you're either going to love it or hate it. Again, you're not going to get all your answers, and that is a little frustrating, but at the same time, it's like it's still left me at the end of this book going, what was all this? So that's it for that particular list of my favorite books. Let's move into my favorite books that I did read in 2024 that were actually published in 2024. First up, The Tower by Flora Carr. This is historical fiction, basically telling the story of Mary Queen of Scots' imprisonment in, what castle was it? I gotta look. One of the castles Loch Leven Castle, I believe is what the castle is. This is about Mary Queen of Scots' imprisonment in this particular castle, and yet being with her very small select group of ladies in waiting. Yeah, if you know anything about Mary Queen of Scots, she was related to the Tudors. She was cousin to Queen Elizabeth I, and yeah, Queen Elizabeth I saw her as a big, huge threat. And yeah, after the death of Mary Queen of Scots, her son, when Elizabeth I dies, her son becomes King James of England. So it's like Mary gets a little bit of validation there eventually after the death of Elizabeth. But yeah, Elizabeth does have Mary Queen of Scots beheaded at some point to wipe her out as a threat. Like I said, this whole book is Mary Queen of Scots' imprisonment. It is a very isolating, bleak book. It's all in one location. It's pretty much all in this one room. It's all kind of in like the surrounding kind of land, because Mary can go out and get a little bit of exercise, with guards watching her every move and whatnot. It is just a very isolating, bleak book, yeah, guys. Just no sense of hope or anything, and yeah, Mary really trying to figure out escape opportunities, essentially. And of course, if you know your history, she's not going to escape. She's not going to escape. She's going to eventually get beheaded at some point. But I really enjoyed this book, and kind of one of those lesser known events in the life of Mary Queen of Scots that this book is exploring. Next up, The Fox Wife by Yangzi Chu. This book takes place in Manchuria in 1908, and this is a work of kind of like imaginative historical fiction, if you will, but playing with mythology. And it follows a young woman who is actually not really a young woman. She's actually a fox. She's a shapeshifter. She's a fox for real, but she can shapeshift and turn into a beautiful woman. So a big thing going on in this book is her journey to figure out who killed her child. She is seeking justice and revenge for the person who killed her child. So that kind of takes her to various different places as she's kind of getting clues about who killed her child. So it's not only her story, but it's also the story of this elderly detective who's investigating the death of the courtesan. And it's also the story of this family who they've had some sort of weird curse placed on their family where, like, is it the firstborn? I think it's like the firstborn in their family. By the time they reach like the age of 24 or something like that, they die just tragically and just out of nowhere. It's a crazy thing. It's a big family curse. So there's a lot going on in this book, and some of it worked for me, some of it didn't, but it all eventually ties in together because all of these very different elements, you may be thinking to yourself, what does all this have to do with each other and how does it all connect? It does eventually. You got to get through it. It is a bit of a kind of a very, very slow burn of a book, but I did enjoy this. It's not my favorite by Yangzi Chu. I've enjoyed Yangzi Chu's previous books, The Night Tiger and The Ghost Bride. I freaking love those books, but this is still pleasant and enjoyable for what it is. Next up, We Are Only Ghosts by Jeffrey L. Richards. This book takes place in 1960s New York. We're following a man who is working at a really nice fancy restaurant, and one day in this fancy restaurant, while he's working, one day in walks someone very familiar to this man, someone he recognizes very intimately. And the thing is, this man who walks in is actually a former Nazi officer. And these two have a history with one another back during World War II. A history that was very intimate and sexual, we shall say. Very problematic and toxic. Because, yeah, not only is this a Nazi officer, but yeah, the man... he was a Jewish prisoner in one of the concentration camps. So this book flashes back and forth between New York in the 1960s, and then what was going on during World War II. Our main character, the things that he had to endure, what his life was like before the concentration camps, and how he kind of gets in the employ, if you will, of this Nazi officer, and the problematic nature that ensues and how that starts up and whatnot. This is definitely a book it's all about identity. It's about stolen identity, and it's about trying to reclaim identity. It's a very, very deep book, I think, and the structure of this book, I really particularly love the structure of this book, and how that loss of identity is handled, plus how the reclamation of identity is handled. Yeah, a very engaging, thought-provoking read for sure. Next up, The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh by Claudia Gray. This is book 3 in this particular installment. What you need to know about this series is that this universe takes place in the universe of Jane Austen. So you have all your favorite Jane Austen characters inhabiting this book. But yeah, it's focused on like their children. So your two main characters, you have Juliet Tilney, who is related to the characters from Northanger Abbey, and then you have Jonathan Darcy, who is obviously related to the characters from Pride and Prejudice. So you have these two young people who, in all 3 books so far, they've teamed up together to figure out like a murder mystery. The very first book was called The Death of or the murder of Mr. Wickham. Obviously, they had to figure out the murder of Mr. Wickham. The second book had to do with solving the case of Mrs. Willoughby, her murder. So this third book is focused on Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who is from the world of Pride and Prejudice, and there is someone out trying to kill her. She has barely escaped multiple like assassination attempts. So Juliet and Jonathan have to figure out who is trying to kill Lady Catherine de Bourgh before it's too late, before she does actually wind up dead. Yeah, this series so far, they're just really quaint and fun and charming. There's not a hell of a lot to them, but I really highly enjoy them for what they are. And they give me a nice laugh, they give me a smile. Like I said, they're cute and charming. I love them. And yeah, it's just really nice to be back in the world of Jane Austen to some capacity. Next up, The Seventh Veil of Salam by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a book that takes place during like the golden age of Hollywood, like during the 1950s, I believe, is when this book is set. And it follows 2 actresses who are rivals in the business, and they're both competing for the same role, which is the character of Salam, Salam from like biblical legend, the woman who wanted John the Baptist's head on a silver platter, essentially, They're both competing for this role in a film called The Seventh Veil of Salam, trying to be Salam in this movie. So this whole book, it's taking place during that time period when, the big sword and sandal epic movies, things like Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments. The Seventh Veil of Salam is supposed to be kind of like that sort of movie. So yeah, your 2 leads, you have a young Mexican woman who basically kind of comes on in and she gets the role. You learn that immediately. She gets the role pretty immediately in this book. So it's her getting this role, and yet being a woman of color in Hollywood, a Mexican woman at that in Hollywood. And then, it's also the story of another woman who has kind of been in Hollywood for a number of years, and she feels like she's entitled to this role, and yet she's really pissed off when she does not get this role. So it's about their rivalry and this jealousy that happens, and kind of the desperation that ensues from that point. And it's also the story of Salam herself. So we do have some extreme flashback chapters to like the biblical era, and we do see the character of Salam and how we do get to that point with, the beheading of John the Baptist. So I really liked this book. Another hit by Silvia Moreno Garcia, I think, because a lot of the books that I've read from her so far, a lot of them have been more in the horror genre. So this was just nice to have just straight up historical fiction, and yet taking place during the golden age of Hollywood, and just the nature of Hollywood during this time period. That appearances are everything, and it's make or break for you. If you cause any sort of scandal, that's it for your career. So I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Next up, What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher, and this is the follow-up to What Moves the Dead. What Moves the Dead was a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and this retelling, it's not really entirely based on anything, but it's still kind of based on just mythology, like European mythology in general. This book, it's a very, very tiny book. We reunite with Alex Easton. Alex Easton, they are returning back to their ancestral home. But yeah, their ancestral home has kind of fallen into disrepair, and the housekeeper is really lazy. And in the surrounding villages around their ancestral home, there's like all this paranoia and superstition going on within the villages that there's some sort of monster lurking about that's like sucking the souls out of people while they sleep. So this book goes back to kind of that horror element like the previous book did, and Alex Easton and their group of friends, they have to figure out if this is just paranoia, if it's just superstition, is there any truth or fact to this monster going around while people are sleeping, you know, sucking at their life force and whatnot. Yeah, this book is not as good as What Moves the Dead, I don't think, but I still had an immensely fun time reading it because I just freaking love these characters. I love these characters and I love this world. And I'm really, really hoping T. Kingfisher writes a third book for this because I love the character of Alex Easton so much. And yeah, the very first book I think was very genuinely scary. This book is not that scary. There are definitely some horror elements. If anything, I think this book is very highly comedic. I love T. Kingfisher's sense of humor. The characters just have such charm and wit, and that's all I care about. Next up, After Oz by Gordon McAlpine. Wow, I love this book, you guys. If you can't tell, this book is taking place after the events of The Wizard of Oz, essentially. And this book just really posed some interesting thoughts and questions because in reality, a young girl coming back from an imaginary fantasy place, which to her felt genuinely real, the thing is, coming back into reality, people would think she was just crazy. So this book is about Dorothy Gale coming back from Oz, and obviously no one believes her that Oz is real. And not only that, she is being blamed for a murder that has happened. I'm not going to tell you who winds up murdered, but someone has wound up murdered. Dorothy is blamed, and very quickly she is just thrown right into a mental asylum where she spends the entirety of this book, pretty much. But this female doctor who's like a psychiatrist, or yes, she would have been called like an alienist back in the day. This female psychologist, she thinks there's something sketchy and fishy going on, that somebody else murdered this woman, that Dorothy is not to blame, that yeah, Dorothy may be delusional, but she didn't commit murder, you know. So this female psychologist kind of takes it upon herself to, you know, be a lady detective. I do love the lady detective genre, you guys. And she kind of goes around to the townspeople, the villagers, and she tries to figure out who could have committed this murder. She wants to, you know, give Dorothy back her good name, and that this little girl, she doesn't want this little girl to spend the rest of her life in an insane asylum for something she did not do. I love this book, you guys. It's definitely about a small town. It's about people with really strong, heavy Christian beliefs, and yeah, kind of the hypocrisy that ensues from that. You know, how they treat each other, how they treat their families, how they treat Dorothy. You know, they all claim to be good Christians, but a lot of them are just really terrible people. So it's about a really small, tight-knit community who really put everything on their religious values, and again, the hypocrisy that kind of comes from that. It's a very, very tiny book. I just really loved the concept of this book, just so unique and original. You know, a book that has nothing to do with actually, you know, going into Oz. I liked kind of the more realistic take, you know, what would happen to a young girl coming out of a place like Oz, and obviously people not believing her, thinking she's crazy. I love that whole idea. At number 3, The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. You know, there's some elements of this book that didn't entirely work for me, but boy oh boy, I still found myself just in love with this book. I love the characters. Yes, I do think the world building could have been improved upon. Just certain elements could have been improved upon, but for whatever reason, I just still feel head over heels in love with this book, especially the characters, especially the big romance of this book. Oh my God, that was my sort of thing. This book takes place in Spain in the 1600s, like the very, very early 1600s? No, 1500s. It's 1500s if I'm not mistaken, because I believe Queen Elizabeth is Queen of England at the time. This book takes place in Spain, very late 1500s if I'm not mistaken, following a young Jewish woman who has magical gifts and abilities, and yet again, she's Jewish. We have the Spanish Inquisition going on. They're going to hunt you down. So she has to hide her gifts to some degree, but in this world, it's very well known and established that people do have special gifts, because the secretary to the King of Spain, he's actually holding like this tournament to find the best, I guess, magician, for lack of a better word. He's trying to find the best magician, someone who can aid in the help with the Spanish Armada, you know, Spain's fight against England, against Queen Elizabeth I. So yeah, we have this whole tournament that goes on between magical users, if you will. Yeah, our young leading heroine is part of it, and she has to prove herself. And yeah, aiding her in her journey is this really mysterious, handsome figure who is like centuries old, and he's a familiar, essentially, hence the title. And of course, the two of them, they start up a very sexy, chemistry-filled relationship, yeah, guys, and I was totally here for it. It's Leigh Bardugo. It's gonna be hot. I really enjoyed this book. I think the concept was really intriguing and unique. Yeah, if you've ever read something like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, you know, that's it's almost kind of the same. You know, it's set in an alternate version of history with two rival magicians, you know, and the thing is being used in the war against Napoleon in that book. You know, they need magicians to help fight Napoleon and his armies and battalions. So it's kind of similar in this book, you know, why the secretary to the King of Spain, why he's looking for magic users. You know, it's all to help with the Spanish Armada and to fight back against England and whatnot. So I really, really liked this book. I'm kind of really secretly hoping Leigh Bardugo, she writes a sequel to this book, or hell, even a prequel. I would be here for that too. I really liked being in this world, and I was really devastated to leave it. At number 2, One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. What you need to know about this book? Very typical of Ruth Ware, you know, a psychological thriller, a very intense psychological thriller. This follows a couple, a man and woman who they get this bizarre chance to appear on a reality television series. It's kind of like The Bachelor meets Survivor, if you will. So the premise of this TV show, this reality TV show that they're entering into, it's going to be focusing on couples, and the couples have to compete, and yeah, one of them has to make it to the very end, obviously, to win the monetary award or whatever. So you have that, the instigating thing that gets all of these couples to this island. The reality show is going to take place on this isolated island, and lo and behold, no sooner do they start filming for like the first episode and eliminating like the first player, all of a sudden here comes this crazy storm, and electricity is cut off. Their rations are dwindling. For whatever reason, the crew took off. So all that's left on this island are just the contestants. And it's, like I said, it's like The Bachelor meets Survivor. And it turns into a real life and death situation that they have to provide for themselves, fend for themselves, because again, their rations are dwindling. They don't have any electricity. And yet, several people have died and continue to die through this book. I really enjoyed this latest book by Ruth Ware. I thought it was really fun. I think the commentary was very interesting. There's a couple different commentaries going on in this book, because there's the commentary of the state of reality television as it is in our modern society. So there's that commentary, but it's also a commentary on just relationships in general. It's a commentary on the perception we want others to see of us. And yeah, this book goes to some really dark, extreme places that are almost kind of unexpected, but make sense in the context of what's going on in this book. I really enjoyed it. And my number one favorite book that I read in the year of 2024, that was published in 2024, is The Ministry of Time by Kaylin Bradley. I was highly looking forward to this book, you guys, and it did not disappoint. I loved it. And I've said before that science fiction is kind of one of those genres that I have a bit of a difficult time with, but this type of science fiction I really liked because it was also kind of a nice little blend of historical fiction too. So this book takes place in the near future, we shall say, and in the near future, there is this agency within, the government or whatever, this agency that they are experimenting with time travel, essentially. And they have a time machine where they can go back to the past and just rip people from their present and bring them into our present. So our main woman, she works for the ministry, and weirdly enough, we never ever get her name. We never get her name. So our main woman, she works for the ministry, and people are given someone from the past that they are essentially looking out for and caring for and teaching them about modern society, So the person that she gets placed with, that she's to teach, the ways of the modern world, she is given Graham Gore. Graham Gore was part of the expedition under Franklin back in like the 1800s, 1847, I believe it was. And if you know anything about the Franklin expedition, everybody kind of disappeared. Everybody kind of mysteriously disappeared. No one really entirely knows what happened, but everybody died. We know good and well everybody died. And yeah, if you've ever seen like the TV show The Terror, which is based off of the book by Dan Simons, that season of The Terror focused on the Franklin expedition and kind of theory crafting how everyone died, but they put like a supernatural twist on it and whatnot. So this book, like I said, our main woman, she is charged with looking after Graham Gore. And he's brought here into, the future, and things are just wild and new and exciting and terrifying. And it's up to our main woman to teach him those things, to help him adapt and stabilize into modern society. And of course, they start building up a relationship with one another, which they shouldn't be. It's kind of illegal. It's forbidden for the teams like this to mingle in a romantic fashion, but mingle they do. So this book is like part romance, part historical fiction, part science fiction. The direction of this book kind of goes wild and crazy. You're either going to love it or hate it. But I loved it. I love the core relationship. The humor in this book is like spot on. I loved the particular sense of dry humor in this. Plus, me being a history nerd, I just love that type of humor too. But yeah, this was a wonderful, pleasant surprise of a book, and I was really looking forward to it, and I'm glad I loved it as much as I did. So you guys, that is it for all of the books that I enjoyed in the year of 2024. So many books. You guys, in the comments below, have you guys read any of the books that were in my list? And yeah, what were your personal favorite books of the year? Please share with me down below. So yeah, here's to another year of fantastic books. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.